Hey, welcome back to the recap slash review of Severance Season 2. This is going to be for episode 2, and it's called Goodbye, Mrs. Selvig. So let's dive right into it. The first scene it has like a voiceover thing of them, waking up or doing the overtime contingency, but then it goes right into Mark now as his outie self talking to his sister in her house and talking about everything that was happening when he was his innie self, which she's actually okay with, it seems like, or she understands what's going on. They're talking a little bit. It's a very like warm scene. Right after that, though, we cut to the cold blue look, and it's Helly's outie and her talking to her dad about the obvious screw up that she was doing at that conference. And so she starts off looking at herself, though, and she's grabbing her neck, which is interesting because it's like she's remembering the bruises, or she obviously she knew what happened to her innie, and so she's kind of has an inner conflict. And then the dad comes in, basically insults her. She says she'll take care of it, or she understands what actually happened as a result of her innie doing that. After that, we go over to Dylan leaving. He's got like an ice bag over his head. There's this huge mural of Kier on the wall, and it's obviously very blue because we're still in the Lumen building. So they're keeping that color theory going along with the rest of the show. And then this scene is probably one of the most powerful that I've seen in the show so far. It's showing Helly walking along the top of the Lumen building, but she's just has a straight line with it. She's not back and forth in the hallways like they kind of are in the rat maze sort of severed floor. She's walking, and the camera's following her the whole time. You have the clear glass coming out of the building. She doesn't have any restrictions, no walls and everything, but the scene's still very dark. And I find that interesting because throughout the show, it seems like the outie world is darker, or it's at nighttime, that kind of thing, whereas the innie world is light, of course, and it's in an office and it's well lit and everything. So that's kind of an interesting back and forth mix between the two, and I'm not sure quite yet what all that means, but definitely theorize about it in the comments or something. We find out that Helly is actually going to talk to Mrs. Selvig about the incident and everything that happened. They try to promote her, but she kind of understands that they're firing her without firing her. She's told that Milchek has taken over her job, and she's very insistent that she's put back into it, but they let her know, either take this promotion or you can go, and she says she'll think about it and everything. It's a very tense scene, but you can tell that she has a lot of reservations about the company, and they don't want her anywhere near the severed floor anymore, now that everything's come to light of her kind of almost stalking Mark on the outside and that kind of thing. A funny thing I noticed, though, is the boardroom for the board, but the conference room chairs are just the worst design ever. They're just, I think you're designed to be uncomfortable, which makes sense the way that this scene is set up and the way that everything's set up. But I just found that funny if there was an actual conference room set up like this. I believe as the interview is going on between Mrs. Selvig and Helly, Milchek's told to go out and talk to the outies and see what they know, and told that, if Kier tells you to basically fire them, or to fire them, and if he thinks that they should stay on, they can stay on. So he hops on his motorcycle, and there's a shot of the license plate, and so I had to pause that. My Latin's gonna get all messed up, but it's Remedium Hominibus, which comes up that it's remedy for humans. So I think that's very interesting as a license plate thing. I'm not sure what the numbers and the letters are. There might be something to that, but I do find it very interesting that his motorcycle seems almost like modern. So it's hard to tell the time where all this is set, but there are certain things that are modern, and then there's certain things that feel very outdated. So I know that there's cell phones in some scenes, but then of course the severed floors using these computers that look like they're, from 1980s or similar. And so his motorcycle being modern, and then a lot of the cars that you see seem to be outdated. So that's an interesting thing of maybe like a corporate versus not. Then we go to Helly giving her confession on tape, her Audi at least, of not meaning anything that she was saying at the presentation, and how, she was drunk and she had taken some medication that wasn't from Lumen, but the two mixed together and she thought she was making a joke and everything like that. And it's presumed this is going to be like a TV segment or a press release, something similar to that, to do damage control for what had happened. Something I noticed that was kind of interesting, though, is the computer and everything that it's filmed with seem kind of not outdated, but they have that kind of retro look to them. And I almost wonder if a lot of Lumen stuff is, disconnected from the internet, or, contained in some way later on. When Dylan is looking for a job in this episode, the guy in the door factory says, hey, Lumen makes all their doors in-house. And so it's a very close-knit thing, of course. There's a lot of secrecy going on in the company. So as the Helly scene is going on, Milchek is going around, and he ends up firing Irving and Dylan. And when he leaves Dylan's, he goes around this cul-de-sac, and it's an upside-down teardrop that looks like a upside down version of the Lumen logo. And I find that interesting because that was similar to the balloons that Mark was given in the first episode. And so it makes me wonder if this is, a way of them letting you know that people are fired, which is also interesting because Mark wasn't fired. So the fact that Dylan has this when he's fired, I didn't see anything around Irving's scene that would have indicated a similar symbol. Then we go to Milchek actually checking on Mark. The photo that I ended up using, I noticed that he's actually looking at the book on the table, and I didn't notice that when I was watching the episode, but he's kind of trying to figure out what's going on. Mark, of course, lies or says that he doesn't know, and then Milchek explains the overtime contingency and how, you can find that in the employee manual and everything, and Mark is kind of a, 50-50 of, well, I don't even know if I want to come back to work, so what's the point of this? Milchek leaves, but he's like, I'll circle back on this. So that's kind of interesting. It feels very invasive, though, because he is at the sister and brother-in-law's house during this. Like, he comes straight there, so he already knew where to go and where Mark was. Then we go to Dylan, that's looking for a new job. He has a family, and at this point, he is still, spoiler, fired from Lumen, and so he is talking to this guy that's running a door factory, I guess, and trying to get a job there. And it's kind of interesting because the actor they use for, which of course is intentional, I would think, looks similar to him enough. They have the, kind of similar beards and haircuts and everything like that. At the end, the guy says no about the job because he doesn't like severed people. But doors seem to be playing a very important overall theme to the TV show we had, where they were installing the locked door in the previous season, and then we have the elevator door with the red on it, and then we have the elevator doors in general. So overall, there's like this, doors being open and closed, secrets, that kind of thing. Then we go to Mark talking to his sister in the Pip Cafe, which is actually Kier's nickname or something like that. They're talking in the cafe about whether or not he thinks that his innie was serious about the wife being alive. The sister's kind of trying to convince him to explore that further, and he doesn't want to do that. He's just kind of like, I've seen that she's dead. I identified her body. I don't want to even consider the possibility she might be alive. I'm trying to move on. And then we have a waiter that actually puts 2 waters down, which is interesting because they already have coffees, and it seems like it's going back into this dinner of water idea. And so food is a point in the show that's kind of odd. You don't really see people eating. The snacks are used as a reward. As they're cutting away from the cafe scene, we see that one of the Lumen security guys, who seems to be Helly's Audi's security person guy, he has this tattoo on his hand that says Frolic, and I can't remember if that matched the tattoo of the security guy who died in the first season. Spoilers. I just found it interesting that they focused on this because they did want you to actually see that tattoo as he's listening into their conversation of what Audi Mark actually knows. Then it goes over to Irving making this very suspicious phone call. This is Audi Irving doing a phone call at a phone booth, and I think he's warning someone. It was kind of hard to follow what's going on with it, but he's out there. It's nighttime, again, keeping with the dark themes of everything, but he's calling someone on the phone. Right after that, they cut to the fact that he's being watched, and you kind of assume it's someone from Lumen, and it turns out that it's Audi Bert who was watching him make this phone call. And I don't know if it was Irving trying to call Bert and then that they know each other and on the outside, or if there was something else going on. But it is interesting that Bert is stalking him, watching him. There's this scene that shows Mark arriving back at work. And so he does decide to come back to Lumen after Milchek talks to him at home and lets him know of kind of the reforms that they're doing and offers him a raise, that kind of thing, and says that you were happier on the inside. Thought it was interesting in this scene. A lot of the cars are green, and then basically all the cars look the same. And so comparing that to like Milchek's motorcycle, for example, it's interesting that these cars look outdated and then he looks modern. One of the last scenes in it is showing all of them as their Audis going back to work at Lumen. And so what ends up happening is they have this very brief sort of scene, but they say that Mark isn't going to complete the project. There's this project going on, and he's not going to complete it without his original team or without the team that he had. And so they have to rehire Irving and Dylan, and then Helly, kind of resentfully goes back to work as well because she doesn't want to go back to her innie being so abrasive and so against all of this. She's the last one to go down the elevator, and it's just interesting because if you pause it or if you look at how she puts on her company lanyard, it again looks like an upside down teardrop or an upside down drop, which would be the reverse of the Lumen logo. The way that her face is when she puts it on, she has almost the same expression that she did when she was putting on the noose. So that's a huge symbolism that's going on there. And then she's almost now the one being trapped down there versus everyone else who is trapped above almost in a way. And then the last scene of the episode is Mark actually seeing Mrs. Selvig come back to her house, and he confronts her. She's like, I thought you were leaving Lumen anyways. Why are you still working there? And she kind of tries to run off. So he jumps in front of her car, starts asking her everything. Is my wife still alive? What's really going on here? What do you know? And she doesn't say anything until he's finally done with the questions. She screams and then drives off into the night. That's it. It's, again, the episode title, Goodbye, Mrs. Selvig. I think she might be out of the show now, or she might be done with this section of it. But it's interesting that she had such an outburst about it. And so she's almost still trapped, or she's having some conflicts of what she knows. I'm not sure yet. We're going to have to watch more episodes, of course. All right, thanks again for watching that recap. I'm very excited for episode 3, and subscribe if you want to keep following this. Comment below if you have any theories or stuff that you'd like me to, dig into or look more into. I'm definitely up for hearing what people say. And until next time, thanks.